Thank you.
Thank you. Good evening. My name is, welcome to this is the 22nd session of the public hearing for the comprehensive permit for 582 Blue Hill Avenue. My name is Jeffrey Mullen, acting as chair for the Board of Appeals. With me is Giselle Joffer and Frank O'Brien, members. Tonight we expect to hear from town officials with respect to the drainage, stormwater and drainage proposal that's been made by the applicant with respect to this application, as well as an offsite infrastructure condition report based upon the work that's been done, the peer review, and the applicant's submittal. Let me before we start, let me tell the audience that since our last hearing last session of the hearing Wednesday, we received a letter from Mr. Hill. We received a series of videos from Mr. Donahue that document the condition of the bottom of Meeting House Lane during the most recent storm, along with a narrative description of what the videos depict, and that's available on the website. And we received a package of materials from Mr. Schumer. I'd like to reserve time tonight for Mr. Schumer to walk us through that package. Thank you for that. Mr. Schumer, you should know we did thank you for the copies, and the members of the board have hard copies of those due to the Milton's expert delivery service. So let me ask the members if they've got any questions before we begin the hearing tonight.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. None from me at this time.
No questions, Mr. Chairman. Let's rock and roll.
Okay. Mr. Schumer, any questions, comments on the introduction?
No, Mr. Chair. Good evening.
Okay. Mr. Zawinski?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We have Chase Berkeley, the Director of the Department of Public Works here to offer his comments and analysis on the peer review report by Sean Reardon, and also the offsite infrastructure report that was provided by the applicant. So if you'll indulge, Chase can go ahead and take it away.
Welcome to the board, Mr. Berkeley. Good to see you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. You as well. And thank you for allowing us the extra week to come tonight to present, because that did give us a chance to meet. Met with Sean Reardon and the town engineer, Marina Fernandez, and we're able to review his comments. So appreciate that extra time.
Okay.
Again, Chase Berkeley, Director of Public Works for the town. Couple of general comments for any type of project that we get asked to review. So the Public Works Department and Engineering Department basically rely solely on the technical expertise of the peer review consultants for both traffic analysis and stormwater analysis, simply because we just do not possess the necessary software, resources, and frankly, time to do a thorough review. So when we issue comments on stormwater and traffic, they tend to be supportive of the peer review, and we want you to know that we have looked at these, agree with the assumptions and information presented. We've had a chance to meet with Mr. Reardon, walk through all of his comments, and find them to be on point and in our best interest as town representatives. So I would like to highlight a few things. I've broken them up into categories, but happy to bounce around in whatever order you'd like and focus more attention on anything you think is appropriate. So the first topic I listed was just general site constructability. So based on all the material we reviewed, we haven't really seen any type of construction sequencing or construction management plan. And that's particularly important to the public works side of it, because we want to know if and what area outside the project limits might be necessary to construct such a project. Typically on a project that's trying to occupy almost all of the footprint, you need room outside of that footprint. And that tends to happen on the public ways around the project area. And so it would be very helpful to know whether or not there's any space needed beyond the limits and how that sequencing will happen. for a project of this size, there's a number of different types of contractors that are typically working simultaneously. There's a lot of equipment, materials need to be stored on the site. Access needs to be maintained in and out. So it's very helpful to have a clear understanding of how that's actually going to be achieved through all the different phases of construction. And just didn't see that in the material. If I missed it, I apologize, but I didn't see that type of plan, and maybe we're not there yet. But
Let me just thank you for that comment. I don't mean to interrupt you, but that did come. A preliminary construction management plan was in the submittal that came 2 days ago. So you didn't miss it. You didn't have it. You now have it, but it just arrived. Mr. Schumer, I'm sure when he gets to his presentation, he'll make reference to it. But we do have something along those lines. I'm not going to call it a construction management plan. I haven't looked at it myself, but it is in the materials. Excuse me.
Okay, that's great. That's great to hear. So we'd be happy to look at that too.
Yeah.
And just to highlight too, again, this is not a town road that this address is on. This is a MassDOT road. So we don't have the authority to allow you to occupy space on this road. So the applicant should just be aware that they need to engage MassDOT at the same time if that's one of the requirements.
Yeah.
So so moving on from that, so we can go right into stormwater. I know that's on a lot of people's mind. So again, third-party review comments we reviewed with Tetra Tech, Mr. Reardon, and essentially agree on everything that they've offered. And I believe the latest update was a July 7th-ish date. So we reviewed that letter. July 2nd, I'm sorry. So a couple of things. So as you mentioned, we have received a lot of pictures and videos since the heavy rains that we saw in July. We're pretty much on pace for the wettest July in almost a century. And so that information just highlights what the existing conditions are out there. So when we see videos of water running down streets, the intermittent stream, the hydraulic dynamic of all that, that's what it is today. And it's just incredibly important that we don't exacerbate any of those conditions, by construction of this project. And so a lot of that is proved through the calculations provided, and those calculations are then back checked by the peer reviewing consultant. But it's a point of focus to make sure that all of the assumptions used in these models, all of the understanding of what is being calculated and what size storms we're looking at is everybody's on the same page of what we understand is being looked at. So there's no doubt this is a very wet area, and when it rains, there's a pretty great elevation change from Blue Hill Avenue down Meeting House Lane to Alfred Road, and water naturally wants to follow those paths and is following those paths. So as you review these videos that have been submitted, that's what we have today, and we don't want to make it any worse. And that's our concern, because our system is already stressed as these videos show and sized to handle a certain size. And we always equate stormwater to traffic, actually, because it's a very simple concept for lay people to translate. So when you think about too much traffic on a highway and what happens to the on-ramps, people can't get onto the highway slows. Stormwater is essentially the same thing, is that you're trying to fit more than the system can carry. And what happens when that happens? So where does that excess flow go? And we all know that it goes through the town of Milton when it comes to the highway system. So a very similar analogy to think of if you don't have to understand all the technical calculations to understand that when there's too much stormwater for a pipe, it finds another path to take. And so I was going to jump off of stormwater there because that was more of a broad sense, but I know there's probably some questions. Mr. Chair, I'll leave it up to you if you want to dig deeper into that, or if you want to come back.
Why don't you complete with your testimony, and then we can ask, people I'm sure are taking notes. We can ask questions all at the same time.
Sounds good. Okay, so then the last topic I wanted to focus on was the sanitary sewer connection to Meeting House Lane and Alfred Road. So it might not be intuitive that it's not just a simple yes or no question as whether or not that sewer line is capable of handling the new flows. So what we did is, so the town of Milton has a consultant that's been consistently overseeing and managing stormwater, the sanitary sewer system in town. And so they have a long history and a lot of institutional knowledge about our system. So we asked them to look at the capacity in this area. And after reviewing all the available record drawings, what information we've had from previous investigations, it's apparent that we need to do more field survey work in order to understand the exact layout of the sewer line. We have conflicting record drawings. We're not exactly sure what's underground. And so we sought a proposal from them of what it would take to do a proper capacity analysis, which we have and we can share with you. But it's going to involve some field work, some survey work, flow monitoring during wet weather to understand what, if any, impacts rainwater has on the sewer system through what we call I&I, or inflow and infiltration, and how that might relate to how much capacity is left in that sewer, and if it is a true concern. So I'm not exactly sure through the 40B process how that best plays out, but we do have a proposal. You could review it. We were happy to share that with the applicant's engineer. I would be okay with the applicant's engineer completing that analysis, or we could use the town's consultant. That is not so much of a concern. It's a fairly simple system to analyze. We just need to get the information in order to do it correctly. And that's typically, my history in the city of Boston. Typically on a large project, the applicant's engineer would submit a certified report, and there's a professional stamp on that, and we take that with a lot of merit. And there's really no need to redo that analysis a second time and create unnecessary expense. And so that was really the 4 points I wanted to hit on. Happy to go back and walk through some of these in more detail, or take any other questions if people wanted to talk through those.
Thank you, Mr. Berkeley. Let me ask the members if they've got any questions for Mr. Berkeley. Mr. O'Brien.
I have several, Mr. Chairman. Thank you. And thank you, Mr. Berkeley. Good to see you again. Could you give me an idea of when you say sanitary sewer connection? Obviously, we have had a lot of conversations, particularly relative to the homeowner down there, the geometry of the sewer, the manhole, all that sort of stuff. Could you expand upon a little bit in terms of you say that we need a field survey, need to do a full survey, potentially some I&I things that need to have to take a look at, some capacity issues. What are we talking about in terms of time, cost, what's involved? Put it in layman's terms. If you were explaining to the homeowners, what are you doing, and what's it going to result in?
Understood. Yep. So essentially, we need to know how big the pipes really are and how steep they really are, and we don't know that exactly based on our record drawings, because we have drawings that say different things. And so a survey crew needs to actually go out and measure that in the field and verify what size the pipes are and what the slope of those pipes are. And that's a big part of a sewer capacity analysis. Now, the flow monitoring side tells us what happens. So we know under dry weather conditions, everything works great. But the flow monitoring is very important to find out what happens during wet weather conditions. So we do have at least one resident on Meeting House Lane that has reported historic sewer backups into his house, which tells us that the likelihood that rainwater enters the sewer system is there, and that it fills up to a level where it causes that building difficulty to discharge. So flow monitoring tells us how much of that rainwater is actually getting into that sewer system while it's raining. And by looking at that, in addition to that, as you mentioned, there's some geometry going on at the bottom of Meeting House Lane, where you have flow coming in from several pipes all at the same point. And what happens there is it becomes turbulent when flows pick up. So you imagine water swirling around and not flowing smoothly. That can cause additional backwater or levels to rise. And so there's a way to clean that up by constructing, either moving pipes or constructing new manholes. And the flow analysis will tell us if something like that is necessary, or if what's going on is actually minimal. So in terms of cost, the proposal we got is around $20,000 for the full suite. Assuming that it takes all the time that they've accounted for. So they've given a scope, which assumes set number of days, how many hours it would take to do this. But it's a substantial cost for sure. But again, that's just related to how much engineering work is required to do this.
Are you expecting to find that once this is done, that there's going to have to be a substantial resizing of the piping in that area, or perhaps a reconfiguration of the so-called geometry of that particular manhole?
Yeah, so my assumption is the pipe sizes are adequate, but there may need to be either an additional manhole constructed or, maybe some pipe replaced in a different location to better direct that flow in the direction we want it to go in. I don't think a wholesale expansion or enlargement of the system would come up out of this.
Has there been some documentation? I can recall conversations, testimony, and reports and whatnot that have been presented to the board that reference this issue. I believe, and then Mr. DeSalle or his associates can talk about this, but I thought that Mr. DeSalle had already inspected this particular manhole. And what am I incorrect in that recollection?
No, I believe they have. They've done a television inspection. The point of connection is not the concern to us where this project would connect to the source system. It's the downstream connection points that where our system has been reported to have issues. So the portion of the sewer line that was inspected at the connection point from this project is absolutely fine. It's very steep. There's plenty of capacity there. It's what happens to that water when it reaches further downstream, close to the point where the town system connects to the state system, the MWRA, where the area of concern is. So I'm not sure how much analysis the applicant's engineer did on that part of it.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Berkeley. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Well, let me ask. let me ask the applicant if they can respond to Mr. Berkeley's question as to how much analysis was done at the intersection of Alfred and Meeting House.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I will turn that question over to Jim DeSalle, if I may. Thank you.
We've looked at it. My name is Jim DeSalle from DeSalle Burke Sala. We have looked at it in a cursory manner. We have Jim Burke's talked to Mr. Berkeley, and we were waiting for that estimate for a further study and exactly what the scope of that study would be. And we haven't seen it yet, but obviously it must have just come in. But we've already talked to them cursory about, potentially expanding that study to include the area that Mr. Berkeley's talking about.
The report that came in on the offsite drainage infrastructure report says that the existing drain pipe, the drain manholes at Meeting House and Alfred were measured and were inspected and measured. It was found that the existing drain pipes leading to the 15-inch pipe are 12-inch diameter, not 15. So not the 15. I assume that that's part of the inconsistency to which Mr. Berkeley referred. But I'm wondering if there was an inspection, what the results of the inspection were, and whether or not it was limited to the sizing of the pipe and not the condition of the infrastructure itself.
That's correct. You're right. We did it based on just the existing inverts and the flows and the slopes. We didn't do any flow tests or anything like that.
Okay. Mr. O'Brien, is that the end of your questions?
It's the end of my questions regarding the sanitary sewer portion, Mr. Chairman.
Do you have any further questions for Mr. Berkeley?
One question, one additional question. I thank you for accommodating me, Mr. Chairman. basically, am I to understand that you're in complete agreement with Mr. Reardon, the Tetra Tech conclusions relative to the stormwater management system that's being designed here?
Yes, we are.
Thank you. That completes my questions, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Ms. Joffer?
Thank you, Mr. Berkeley. No questions for me.
Thank you. Mr. Berkeley, so we heard the Mr. Reardon has testified that with respect to the offsite impacts, there is a potential, perhaps even it's likely, that the offsite runoff will be better because the stormwater system on site is more robust and will capture more of the water through the timing of its absorption into the soil and into the system. That's not exactly what he said, but I think it's something to that effect, and it will have potentially have a positive impact on Meeting House Lane. Is that accurate, Mr. Reardon?
I think you put it well, yes.
Okay. So you're saying that you agree with that on the town's behalf. My question is, what if that isn't the case? I know that the applicant is obligated under the law to not exacerbate offsite conditions, but what assurances would the town typically have for that to not happen in terms of some type of guarantee, a bond, those kinds of things, given the amount of concern that's been expressed? And basically what I'm responding to is the fact that we have a suboptimal offsite condition, which is being acknowledged tonight, and I think has been acknowledged over the better part of the 7 or 8 months we've been meeting, that needs more work. Okay, so we need more work to be done. At the same time, the applicant is obligated under the law to not exacerbate that. I'm concerned about the risk of exacerbation. And I'm also concerned about whether or not they can work in harmony. That is, the work that's necessary to be done offsite can be done separate and apart from any of the development on site, let's say. And then secondarily, how do these two work together, and what assurances can we have that this will all work?
Understood. Yes. So I can tell you from other projects in Milton that have gone through the planning board and not the ZBA, one of the conditions that has been imposed on the developer is to have very strict oversight in construction inspection of the stormwater systems. So obviously, until they're built, we don't know exactly how they're going to work. There's a design. Whether or not that design is constructed properly is a big piece of it. So in other large projects, they've assigned a specific third-party construction inspector to ensure that the stormwater system is built, not only built, but also preserved during the construction process. So, typically site work can be done early on or late on. It kind of depends on the sequencing, but say we were to construct the stormwater system some point early in the project, we'd want to make sure that that isn't damaged during the rest of the construction. And on top of that, the state level NIPDES permits that are required for this construction site are very cumbersome to do them properly. And the town just doesn't have the resources to properly oversee those permit requirements to their fullest extent. So we have asked for third-party peer inspection on those permit requirements too, which ensure that the construction site, which is most vulnerable during construction, when the site is starting to be demolished, vegetation is removed, that's typically when the most damage to abutting properties happens during these projects. So we want to make sure all the erosion control is in place, that it's adequately sized, and the engineering department, being very small, just doesn't have time and resources to oversee such a large project. So I'm not sure if it's within your authority to assign that type of inspection or where that would fall in, but it would be something that our department would benefit greatly from, to have that additional oversight, particularly on the stormwater system, but really for everything. There's certainly more components than just that.
We've asked the applicant to provide to the board a series of conditions to which it would be willing to subject this project to. So what you just described is something that I would like the applicant to consider. And, certainly Ms. Barrett separately is developing a list of conditions that have been raised in this report. It's what you just described is in the nature of that. Are you recommending that the applicant do the further study on the offsite infrastructure that you described as being scoped for 20,000?
I think that's the only way we can say with assurance that we're not concerned that these additional flows will be a problem.
Okay. Did you look at the intermittent stream?
Yes, we did. Yeah.
Oh, are you going to speak to that or?
I didn't have any more specific comments than what's already in the peer review on that. We know it's a very reactive stream, transposing over public and private property. And it's a maintenance issue for us already. So what you described earlier as the post-project conditions being better than the pre would help with that if that comes to fruition.
It feels to me like the intermittent stream problem is exacerbated by the fact that, at least in its open channel condition, it's private. And it seems, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but it's beyond your jurisdiction. You only get involved with it down at the bottom of the hill at the grate where Ms. Donahue's house is. Is that right?
So from the public works side,
Okay,
yes,
good.
the Conservation Commission may have some jurisdiction over the private land, but
Right.
yeah, from the public works side, our responsibility essentially begins where it enters the culvert pipe system at the bottom of the hill.
I see. Okay, I don't have any further questions. Guess maybe the applicants, does the applicant have questions of Mr. Berkeley?
I do not, Mr. Chair, but I'll turn it again over to Jim DeSalle to see if he has any questions.
No, the only issue would be if we can get a copy of that, the system inspection report and what exactly it entails. That'd be helpful.
You mean the scope?
The scope of the project, yes.
Yeah, we'd be happy to share that with anyone. Yeah.
Thanks.
Mr. Chair, could I just ask, just to check in with Mr. Reardon to make sure I didn't miss anything that we had discussed?
Mr. Reardon?
No, I don't think so. But the one thing I would just mention is we just got to make sure we keep the two issues separate, the stormwater and sewer. So the analysis that is proposed is for sewer. So for the dirty water, and then the other issues are not part of that analysis. The stormwater issues are not part of that proposal.
Yep, that's 100% correct. The town systems are completely independent.
Are there any concerns with the town stormwater system?
Other than what we've already covered, no. We know that its capacity is what it is in current form.
Okay. Further questions, Mr. DeSalle?
Oh, we're good.
Any other questions? Ms. Barrett, any other questions of Mr. Berkeley?
I don't have any at this time, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Berkeley. Let me ask Mr. Hill if he's got a question.
I do. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So Mr. Berkeley, I'm definitely a little bit confused because, we as the neighborhood had retained a civil engineer, John Chestia, who's here tonight, and he can obviously speak to these issues. But John's analysis, by the way, did you see John's analysis, his letter from May 29th?
Yes, I did.
Okay. Because he's coming to diametrically different conclusions than you are and Sean is. And I guess I want to try to figure out where the discrepancy is on that. For example, in Mr. Chestia's report, one of the things that he did, he basically looked at two data points. He looked at the 10-year storm, and he compared the time at which the pipes would be surcharged, the pipes in the Meeting House Lane system, the period of time those pipes would be surcharged, comparing existing conditions to proposed conditions. And in table number 1, for each reach, 7R, 8R, 9R, it was pretty clear that the period of surcharge would be greater under the proposed conditions and the existing conditions. And this was just based on data that was in Jim Burke's report. So I guess the question to you would be, is this, am I misunderstanding or misinterpreting the data? Is John misinterpreting the data?
So my answer, Mr. Hill, is that I actually rely on the peer review to do that analysis. I do not have the staff or resources to back check those calculations.
Okay, I guess I can turn the question to Sean then. I mean, Sean, did you see John Chesh's May 29th report? And
I did. Yep.
What is it that we're missing? Because John basically just took the numbers from the offsite drainage report and interpreted them.
Yep. So 2 points to that. One is I think John also discounted the validity of the offsite report, which I share his concerns about sort of the inaccuracy of the report itself. So my conclusions did not rely on the analysis in total done by DeSalle Burke. What it did is I pulled particular pieces of information from it that were relevant to my analysis. And essentially, it boils down to one thing for me. Well, actually two things. First is the system on site going to result in a lower peak discharge? That I believe it does. So I believe they've demonstrated that the design that they've done will result in a lower peak discharge. The other analysis is where in the system does the site sit, and will the extended duration of the discharge cause a change in the overall system? And I don't think it will, as it relates to either Meeting House Lane or the intermittent stream. The assessment where Mr. Chesia mentions about the duration of flooding, we typically don't consider duration of flooding an exacerbating condition. It's much better to have a longer flood at a lower elevation, because what happens is you have a smaller extent of flooding. So in our opinion, duration of flooding is not nearly as important as height of flooding. And I think the analysis shows that the height of flooding is reduced.
So even though the duration of the flooding is increased, that doesn't equal a exacerbation of the offsite flooding?
Correct, because duration doesn't translate into extent of flooding. Only height does.
Okay. Can I ask a follow-up question, Mr. Chairman? Sean, you mentioned the peak discharge rates pre and post, and your opinion is that they decrease. And that's the second thing that John Chesia looked at, was he compared the rates at Reach 5R. Reach 5R, our understanding is the entry point where the project system goes into the Meeting House Lane system. It's at the top of the hill at the cul-de-sac. And according to Jim Burke's data, the peak rates of discharge into Reach 5R under every storm event increases at proposed conditions. It's in John's table at the end of his letter. So for example, for the 2-year storm, the inflow under existing conditions, the outflow is 0.26 CFS, and under proposed conditions, it's 1.03 CFS. The only reach where it actually goes down is Reach 9R, which is at the very end of the system, where the pipe goes into the Trout Brook. But every other reach before that, for each storm event, it increases. But more importantly, Reach 5R, that's the property boundary. So if you're applying standard number 2, which says you measure the peak discharge rates at the down gradient property boundary, isn't the peak rates increasing?
Well, you're using so there's 2 pieces of analysis that were done by the applicant. One was the very initial analysis on pre versus post development runoff from the site. That was done a couple months ago. The information you're referring to is the supplemental information provided by DeSalle Burke, speaking to the larger system in general. Again, that was the analysis that both we and Mr. Chesia agree is flawed. So again, I don't assign a lot of credibility to the conclusions reached, the specific conclusions reached in that analysis. I extracted from that analysis just several pieces of information that I use for me reaching my conclusions, none of which is the relatively protracted conclusions made by Mr. Burke, which I don't agree with, but were not necessary for my reaching the conclusions that I reached.
But what data, I guess can you tell me, can you tell the board what data is it that you extracted that tells you that the peak rates of discharge are going down?
So from it was the relative position in the larger watershed that are served by the Meeting House Lane drain system and the intermittent drain system. So as it relates to the intermittent stream, the critical pieces of information that we extracted from the information provided by Mr. Burke was that the overall watershed served by the intermittent stream is 75 acres or so. Our project site is less than 2% of that contributing area. So in our opinion, any modest changes on our site is not likely going to reflect on the larger system, given its relatively small size relative to that particular service area. Meeting House Lane, a bit different. Meeting House Lane, the project site is about, I think, about 10% or 12% of that drainage system. So we're a little bit more concerned about the site's impact on Meeting House Lane. But in that case, the site is at the top of the Meeting House Lane system, and any delay that we experience in discharge on the top of the system has a beneficial effect. And that's the case that we have in this particular situation. So what I took more from Mr. Burke's latest analysis is more of the watershed analysis than the actual modeling analysis.
Okay. So Mr. Chairman, I guess one just comment is, as a lawyer, when I hear somebody tell me that they're basically not even considering this 500-page report as evidence of compliance with the stormwater standards, it just that really troubles me, and I think it should trouble the town. If we don't have, the whole point of these reports was to prove that the project complies, and what I'm hearing now is that they don't. And
no, that's not at all what I said. So what I said is that there's information within that report that helps prove that there won't be an exacerbation of downstream conditions.
But the conclusions in the report say the opposite, and that's, I understand what you're saying, Sean, but it's a leap for people like us, me, board members, the public, to just say, we'll trust your judgment because you can see something in these things that we don't, but the reports themselves have data that say the opposite. And I think that's what's really troubling. And I guess I'll just leave it at that. I mean, John Chessie is here tonight, and I don't know if he can shed some light on this. Maybe now's not the right time, Mr. Chairman, but at some point, if John could weigh in on this issue, I would appreciate it.
Let's hold on that for now.
Okay.
For now, see if we can move the agenda. Are you all set, Mr. Hill, for right now?
Yeah, that's good. Thank you.
Okay. Mr. Berkeley, in your initial comments you submitted in the initial version of the project, you indicated that you wanted evidence of the easement that runs from the property to Meeting House Lane. There's been testimony at this hearing that the easement's not been formalized. The applicant's got a strategy to put an easement in place that involves several different things that may or may not happen. Does that concern the town, that there's not the formal legal right to connect?
It would. So typically what we would require is the applicant secure the easement as a condition of connection.
Prior to the connection?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Is there anything else for Mr. Berkeley? Okay, thank you, Mr. Berkeley.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you,
You're
everybody.
welcome. Mr. Zawinski, anything else?
Sorry, Mr. Chair, I had my phone on the other side of the room. I had to scramble to get it.
Okay.
That's all for us.
Okay.
I had let you know via email, but I'll tell everyone else. The select board is actually meeting right now to discuss, among other things, this project and a few of the other 40B projects on the docket. And they requested a few brief minutes at next week's hearing, if possible, to offer some final comments on behalf of the town.
Yeah.
If that's acceptable, they would appreciate the opportunity.
Yeah, that's perfectly fine. So participants in this hearing should expect to hear from the select board on the 21st. Thank you, Tim. Mr. Schumer.
Yes, Mr. Chair.
You're going to speak about your delivery?
Sure, I'd be happy to. So just to confirm for the members, as you already know, and also for members of the public who may not already be aware, earlier this week, we did submit some additional documents in support of this application, and we believe that these are addressing many, if not all, of the outstanding requests for information that the board has made and the board's peer reviewers have made. And it's a fairly lengthy list of documents. They include a revised site plan of the project, which now includes additional information regarding pedestrian accessibility on the site, and particularly in the front of the site, in the area of the sidewalk that leads out to Blue Hill Avenue. We also submitted the final supplemental HydroCAD calculations and the off-site infrastructure drainage analysis that we've been discussing for the last while, as well as an updated copy of the revised engineering report, which itself has not changed. In addition to that, we also provided a letter with an analysis from Mr. Burke regarding the issue of groundwater mounting, which was discussed at some length at the previous hearing. In addition to those engineering documents, we provided an updated architecture plan with updates capturing changes that have been made to date, as well as landscaping plans. And the landscaping plans now include a number of additional sheets which show in particular the site lighting and pedestrian flow around the site. And those were requests from, I believe, Mr. Zerwinski. In addition to the landscaping plans, we have also provided what we believe to be a comprehensive tree protection plan showing the protections that we intend to put in place during the construction of the project to ensure that the trees that we're trying to save in this site redesign are in fact saved and do survive and thrive once the project is completed for construction. In addition, I mentioned before the lighting details plan. We provided some additional details regarding the lighting that we have in mind for the site. In addition to those, Embark also prepared a bicycle storage and trash management plan, and that was in response both to requests from Mr. Zawinski and requests from some of the neighbors regarding information about how the trash would be handled on the site, and that's outlined in that plan. In addition to those documents, as you mentioned, Mr. Chair, we did also submit a preliminary draft construction management plan. It was prepared by Congress Construction and contains a number of provisions for all phases of construction, as well as two sketch plans showing areas such as the parking area for construction workers, the pads for cranes, the tracking pads for vehicles entering and exiting the site, and pretty extensive details regarding how the site will be managed and where things will be stored and where deliveries will go and things of that nature during all phases of construction. In addition to all that, Mr. Chair, I also did provide an updated waiver list, which had only minor revisions from the previous version. The only notable change I would point out is that we did withdraw the request for a waiver from the Milton Town Ways bylaw. And it was an omission on my part, Mr. Chair, to not have withdrawn that request in the previous version of the waiver list. So that was our submission, Mr. Chair. I'm happy to go through any of those documents if you'd like, and we'd be happy to put them up on the screen if that's helpful.
I think it would be helpful to go through the status of the construction management plan, given the amount of attention that it's got. And I wonder if Ms. Barrett might speak to the ability of the peer reviewers, particularly Mr. Bowmer and Mr. Reard, in reviewing these materials and what the timeline for that might be. I'd be interested in feedback on this. I mean, I have the submittal here, but I'd be interested in feedback on the submittal, particularly insofar as it changes what Mr. Bowmer or Mr. Reardon have submitted to the board to date.
So as I think I've indicated before, if not, I apologize. The peer review consultants, just like the applicant's consultants and the neighbors consultants, are all very busy. And so they have requested a 3-week turnaround time to review these, these and other documents in order to provide the board with a competent and complete response. And, Sean, if you disagree with me, speak up, but that is the timeline I laid out in an email quite a while ago, not only about this 40B, but all the others. I think it's 3 weeks.
Sorry.
I'm sorry. So go ahead, Sean.
We've tried to be as responsive as we possibly can, and I haven't seen the submitted information, so I'm hesitant to make any commitments beyond the 3 weeks.
Okay. Mr. Schumer, is it acceptable for us to have a response to you by August 4th?
The response from the peer review, is that
Correct,
Mr. Chair?
Well, I mean, if you think about it from our perspective, we're relying on these peer reviewers. You've done a comprehensive submittal. The board's asking for the peer reviewers to review the comprehensive submittal. Part of it, I know, is in response to their comments. So in theory, it could reduce their comments, but it does seem to me to be a necessary step to verify what the comprehensive submittal represents.
My only hesitation, and I do understand Mr. Reardon and all the peer reviewers, Mr. Bomer, are extremely busy, as everyone is. My only hesitation on that, Mr. Chair, is our intent with submitting this plan was really as a demonstration to the members that some thought has been put into construction of this site, that the site is it is buildable. We have an opinion from a construction company that it is, and a pretty comprehensive proposal showing how it is. Our intent was not to put these additional submittals through a full peer review process, but really just to complete our submission. So with that having been said, I think it's appropriate to have some additional time in this hearing, to extend the hearing for a short period to have some commentary if Mr. Reardon would like to have commentary, and if the board would find that helpful. But that having been said, I would like to bring this hearing to a conclusion, and I know that the board does as well. My only concern is that we don't want to get into a lengthy back and forth with peer review and our consultants and changing things, and then the neighbors making comments and bringing town officials back in for further comment. So I think with all that having been said, I think a brief extension would be appropriate, maybe 2-3 weeks.
Well, what I'm proposing is that we take your submittal. We hear from the town Board of Selectmen next week. I'm also going to propose that the board could have questions on your submittal. I've got questions on the waiver list and some other questions. I want to make some progress on the conditions. So we've asked you for the list of conditions, and we've got our own team working on those as well. But we'd like to see yours. We could certainly speak to that. We can hear from the peer reviewers on the 4th of August and work towards concluding this hearing for the purpose of deliberating and reaching a conclusion on where we are. That's what I'm proposing.
Just so that I understand you, Mr. Chair, and I'm looking at my calendar while I speak to you. Are you suggesting that the close of the hearing date be extended to Wednesday, the 11th of August?
It depends on how many days the board thinks it needs to deliberate. Assuming that you mean that the hearing will not be closed until the deliberations close, or are you saying that the evidentiary portion of the hearing will close and then the board will deliberate?
That's what I had in mind, Mr. Chair. I think from
Okay.
the applicant's perspective, we've submitted as much evidence as I think we have within the context of this hearing. We did our best to provide as much additional information as we could with this additional submittal, and I'll be happy to provide a list of suggested conditions. With respect to the construction management plan, this has obviously been a subject of much discussion, and we went back and forth a number of times on this, and we ultimately made the decision to change course and to provide this information to the board. So I hope it's helpful.
Well, it is a positive development, which is why I'd like you to put it on the screen and I'd like to talk about it. I have a few questions on that. But it's also a critical document that nobody's looked at. So it is going to be, and we are going to want to hear from the people who've testified as to the efficacy of the safety of the construction, and the ability to build this project, and the ability to save the trees, and the location of where contractors are going to park and deliveries are going to be made, and all the things that are intended to this project. But I think it would be helpful to inform the people who participated in this hearing, both on that and on the trash. I don't want to keep going back to the trash, but we have yet to see a trash management plan. I know that one of the drawings shows how the trash is going to be put up, but those are the two issues that are on my mind right now. In addition to scheduling, if the proposal is to close the evidentiary portion of the hearing August 11th for the purpose of the board to conduct deliberations on its decision with respect to this permit, I think we could probably work within that schedule.
Okay, very good. We're agreeable to that schedule.
All right. Can you put the construction management plan on the screen?
Yes, I can.
While we do that, is the entity that prepared the plan, is that the contractor?
That is the company is Congress Construction. They're one company that's being considered. The details of that have not been finalized at this point, but we're leaning at this point to Congress who's doing this.
Do you have experience with Congress?
I myself do not, Mr. Chair.
I mean the applicant. In other words, is this a working relationship that Congress and the applicant have worked together before, and or Congress and the design team, have they worked together before? I'm trying to get an idea of familiar, the level to which people are familiar with working with each other for the purpose of establishing reliance.
Mr. Chair, I can answer that question.
Posey.
Yes, so we've been in discussions with Congress, for several weeks now regarding this and other projects. We have not completed a project with them. However, our project team has embarked with Congress. Congress is a very well-respected construction firm in the Boston area. They've completed, dozens of projects like this project on, similarly constrained sites, large multifamily projects, including, podium garage structures and this type of construction. So we're very confident in Congress's capabilities, and we're very confident in our team's abilities to interact with Congress. I would say that, both Embark has dealt with them as well as our consultants from SCB have worked with them as well, I believe.
So Embark was the designer and Congress was the contractor?
That's my understanding. I think that Dan Riggs could speak if that's incorrect.
Dan? You're on mute.
Sorry about that. I personally haven't worked with them. We have a number of architects from our office who have, and I could dig up those details and provide further information at a later hearing if that's helpful.
Well, I think here's what I'm going for is, after teams work together on projects all the time, and over time, when teams work together, they establish a course of dealing. When something gets submitted late in the process like this, I'm wondering how much of it can be relied on based upon past experience. Okay, so Congress is the contractor, Embarco the designer. I know how they do it. I know what they need. I'm very familiar with the process. This is how we do shop drawings. This is how the trailer gets set up versus I've never worked with these folks before. I'm just going to take this construction management plan off the shelf on a project I worked on in town XYZ. I'm trying to get a sense of what we're looking at here. Is this based upon a long history of working with these particular folks or a long history of working on these kinds of projects versus it's a little bit more generic? You don't have to answer it, but that's the question I'm going for. So it'd be helpful, maybe a little summary of what Congress is all about. And then the second question I have is, are they a general contractor or are they a construction management firm? And more particularly, are they going to do the work? If assuming they get the job.
I believe that's something that, yeah, Mr. Tamposi could provide a little bit more information on. Sorry, Jeff.
Sure, they are the general contractor. They would be, performing the work, overseeing the work on site.
Do you have an idea of how much of the work would be subcontracted out versus self-performed by Congress's own employees?
I don't have that information.
Okay, I'm interested in that. I want to get a sense of what the site's going to be looking for. Are people working for others? Are we going to have a whole lot of subs out there, or are we really talking about a comprehensive contractor who, when they make representations, we can rely on them? So that's the nature of, the questions. But maybe we could put the plan on the screen, and somebody with more knowledge of it than me, who have no knowledge of it, can just walk us through it, if you don't mind.
Certainly, Mr. Chair, I can do
Thanks. Thank you, Mr. Schumer.
that. If is it most appropriate to start with the actual plans that are included in this document, Mr. Chair?
Well, I don't know. Whatever makes sense. Whatever makes sense to you.
Okay.
Just show people what we're looking at.
That probably makes sense to start there. So what I'm showing you here, Mr. Chair, can you see that? Can everyone see that screen? Hopefully it's zoomed in enough. This is the sketch plan of phase 1 of construction. As you can see here, as I move down the plan, there's a red fence that's shown around the perimeter of the site. That's a construction fence. There's also a red perimeter fence around the garden complex here. The area shaded in dark gray here, this is proposed construction parking. And there are stone aprons at both entrances to the site. This would be a temporary contractor's construction road here, and then marked in, I'm not sure what color you would describe that as, some sort of brown. This is marked as the excavation area for the garage structure. And as we move into phase 2 here, Mr. Chair, this shows the vertical construction aspect of the project. We have crane pads here next to the west building, here in the front of the site, and then 2 adjacent to the north building. The construction fences remain, tracking pads at both entrances, and the construction parking. As the project progresses, this will be converted from a temporary contractor's road into the final construction, the final constructed road. And once the plan is, and it's described further in the report, the construction parking area here, once the garage is completed and is sprinkled and is safe for occupancy and certified by the town to be safe for occupancy, the plan would be to move more of the construction parking, storage, staging, and that kind of thing inside the actual garage. And that would free up additional space around this area here for deliveries and staging of materials in the area that was previously used exclusively for parking. Beyond that, Mr. Chair, would you like me to go through the report?
Why don't you give us a sense of what the rest of the report represents and what kind of details in it?
Sure, I'll go back to the beginning if I may, Mr. Chair. So the construction management plan starts with a letter explaining who Congress Construction is and what they do, and then goes into the project details, listing the hours of work, and the hours of work are specified to comply with the Town of Milton's General Bylaw, Chapter 26, which deals with construction hours. and those would be 7 to 7 on Monday through Fridays, 7 to 5 on Saturdays, and between 10 and 3 on Sundays and holidays, to the extent work is required on Sundays and holidays, but we wouldn't expect there to be much, if any, work on Sundays or holidays. And then permission would be required from the town if any work was proposed outside of those hours. And that's all in accordance with the town's general bylaws. As the report moves forward, there's further details about the scope of work and manner and methods of construction, and I won't go into those in detail. I'll let the members review those for yourselves. The construction logistics plan proceeds with phase 1 describing how the site will be prepared, including the erosion controls. There's a silt fence around the property, the construction fence, as well as the fence for the walled garden. And the tree protection plan that I mentioned previously also contains its own tree protection fence around the front of the site, and I can show that for the members if you'd like. But at that time, that fence will be put in place as well as all other protective measures that are required by that tree protection plan. Following that, the site demolition will begin. Installation of the subsurface drainage structures, excavation for the parking area, and the plan here describes where stockpiles will be. It's not expected to have large stockpiles on the site, and to the extent smaller stockpiles are necessary, it describes where those will go, where deliveries will be accommodated, and any off-site work, and this was mentioned by, I believe, Mr. Berkeley earlier tonight, is to be coordinated with the town of Milton and any affected abutters. And I would just note, Mr. Berkeley brings up a good point regarding work in the road. We would also need to coordinate that work with Mass DOT, since that's a state highway. Proceeding on from there, the plan describes the dewatering and stormwater management during the construction process, truck routes and volumes, and how construction impacts will be managed with respect to parking, traffic control, public safety, construction management, scheduling. There's a section dealing with construction parking. As I mentioned before, there's an area that's specified on the site. And the plan also provides that if additional parking is needed, then that's more than what the site can accommodate, that we would be coordinating with the town of Milton to find an offsite location that would be arranged specifically for that purpose. And that the intent of that would be that we wouldn't have construction vehicles parked in front of the neighbors' properties to the extent we can avoid that. The next part of the plan deals with construction air quality, such as dust control, things of that nature, construction debris, construction noise management, rodent control. And these are all details that could be fleshed out further in conditions of the project. For example, with the rodent control and dust control, these could be subject to plans that are submitted to the Milton Board of Health for their approval. The next stage of the plan discusses the vertical construction aspect of the project, where the building takes shape out of the foundations on the parking level, and proceeds to the completion of construction. The construction impact is more or less similar to the previous, as well as the construction parking, air quality standards, construction noise, rodent control. Those would all be the same. This section here discusses the specifics of the construction during this phase, and the number of workers that are anticipated to be on the site, and the same arrangement would apply with respect to parking. If additional parking is needed, we would arrange that with the town. The report provides contact information for the applicant, the architect, Embark, the construction manager, the civil engineer, as well as project manager for the project, the executive of Congress Construction. And it provides that a 24-hour phone contact will be posted at the site, as well as a business hours contact. And the site will be managed under the purview of Joshua Rakapori, who's a licensed construction supervisor. The remainder of the report discusses further considerations regarding construction impacts, traffic, and parking, protections for the shipment garden and the portion of the existing house that will be retained as part of the project, as well as weekly meetings with any subcontractors to ensure that everyone understands that those structures are to be preserved and all reasonable methods taken to ensure that nothing happens during the construction process to damage either the garden complex or the house itself. The remainder is project rules regarding safety and engine idling, construction traffic, and cleaning of the project site and things of that nature. That's the extent of the report, Mr. Chair. We can answer some questions if that would be helpful.
Questions from the members? Why don't we pull it down?
Yes.
Questions from the members?
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. O'Brien.
Mr. Sherman, thank you for providing this. I think one of the other things that bears mention here is the verbiage in your cover letter that you provided along this. Can I basically suggest that you're reserving your rights relative to whether or not to file a construction management plan at all? Is that correct?
Mr. O'Brien, this is intended to serve as the construction management plan. The letter that I submitted with these materials, what I was saying was that we would suggest that a condition of this project be that a comprehensive final non-draft, non-preliminary construction management plan be submitted to the town for review prior to the issuance of any building permits. So this is, I would say this is the preliminary version, and the final version would be submitted to the town for their review prior to issuance of any building permits.
And that's consistent with the position that you've taken. I'm just saying that is consistent with the position that you've taken previously. So I do agree with you that this is a it's nicely organized, but it's very preliminary in nature, and with drafts put all over it. How far away would you estimate the applicant is in terms of developing a more finished product?
I would say, Mr. O'Brien, that it has not been contemplated by us at this point. That would be subject to finalizing final construction drawings, and that process won't start until we have all of our permits in hand and resolved any appeals that are filed, if any.
Thank you, Mr. Sherman. Mr. Chairman, I think some of the questions that I've asked, I mean, I will admit this is literally the first construction management plan, and it's not even a construction management plan per se that I've seen. And I would urge, as you have laid out, I would benefit greatly from a review of this by someone who's much more versed in these documents than I. This looks good, sounds good. I have no idea if it's any good. So I'll just leave it there, Mr. Chairman.
Fair enough. Ms. Joffer.
Thank you. I think I'll just need a little more time to review it, and also would benefit from some expert analysis on the feasibility of the plan.
Yep. Okay, thanks. We'll do that. We're going to ask our peer review consultants to take a look at this and the rest of the comprehensive submittal that you made, Mr. Schomer. I do think you should expect to not submit for the board's incorporation into its decision a document that's stamped owner's draft. So it's going to need to be revised at a minimum for that. But I also think you should reserve, even if it remains preliminary and not the kind of construction management plan that would accompany a project of this size, it needs to accommodate some room for reasonable comments that you hear from the board and from the town's peer review consultants. I'll tell you, one immediate reaction is off-site parking should not be expected, in my opinion. this site does not work well for off-site parking. I cannot imagine any parking that's not wholly included within the site. It's just not an area that is conducive to that. I also think the town has had some not great experiences with contractor parking. So that's a little bit of a sensitive issue, and I'd ask you to reconsider that. I don't know if that's boilerplate, but it just doesn't seem to me that that's going to work well. And that was one key issue that I was focused on, and I was at least thinking about when the construction management plan was being talked about. I know it was principally a safety issue and where the crane is located, and can we save the trees, and is this project buildable? But a combination of the workers is a big deal. I like to see the fact that only contractor vehicles will be on there. I've yet to see a project where that actually happens, but that's nice. That means people will be carpooling to the site and parking will be minimized. So it's all going in the right direction. I just don't think nothing is personal. I don't see neighborhood parking working here. So that's a little bit of immediate feedback, obviously reserving my rights to read it. Let me ask if there's any feedback from either Ms. Barrett or any of the town's peer review consultants right now.
Having just received it?
Yeah.
No, I need to review it.
Okay, all right. So why don't we offer everybody the opportunity to review it and comment, and it'll be part of our feedback that we provide the applicant on August 4th. Fair enough, Mr. Schumer?
Yes, it is, Mr. Chair. Just specifically on that point that you were just discussing of off-site parking, that I can tell you that is not part of their boilerplate. That's actually language that I requested that they provide in there, because I agree with you. It's not optimal to have construction workers parking in the neighborhood just willy-nilly as needed. So if we want to be anticipating exigent circumstances like that, because things do sometimes happen, and we just wanted to make it clear to the board that we are thinking about those kind of situations. And if they did occur, that's something that we would want to arrange with the town of Milton to find where's a location where this could be done. For example, in the summer, maybe there's parking at the high school, something like that.
I think that's perfectly appropriate. What I'm suggesting is neighborhood parking is not.
Agreed.
Not here,
Yep.
Okay. Do you have anything else you'd like to share with the board? I'm interested in your trash.
Certainly, I can put that up. Would you like to see the tree protection plan as well, Mr. Chair?
Yes.
Okay. I'll start with the trash management plan, if that's okay.
Yes.
Bear with me for just one moment. Okay, so this is our trash management and bicycle storage plan. Can everyone see that?
Yes.
Okay. So this is the garage level of the site. As you can see, the L shape, the existing mansion here. We have two dedicated bicycle storage rooms, one here and one here in this corner here. And Embark has designed this with as much compliance with the BPDA design specifications as possible. And that's to provide accessible locations for bikes to be stored on the floor. And that's the intent for these two storage rooms here. So this would store 12 bicycles, this would store 6. And in addition to those two locations where bicycles would be stored on the ground, we have locations here along the wall and here along the wall down here that would provide an additional 16 plus 26 bicycle storage spaces. And that storage there, I can tell the members, that is not maxed out at that point. We've designed this with some additional space in mind to provide some room between the bicycles. More storage spaces can be added there if needed, but we thought that this was an appropriate number to start with, and assess the demand for bicycle storage once the project is up and running. And the areas here in particular in the vertical storage would allow for additional storage racks to be placed here. The bicycles would obviously be closer together, which is challenging for getting them off the walls, which is why we designed it this way, with a little bit of slack space in mind. This plan, the next few pages details the bicycle storage racks. These are just some ideas that Embark has in mind for the wall rack, for the space saver mounted racks, and then some of the racks that would be within the floor storage rooms. The plan also shows some detail for the trash storage room. That's here. As we mentioned before, it has room for rolling containers as well as dumpsters in this location here. The plan would be for the trash and recycling to be rolled out by the site maintenance from the room here. Has a double loaded door at this location down to this location here. This is a maintenance room here and another double loaded door here at the bottom. And they would be left on the sidewalk here for collection at the bottom of the north building. And then once that process is complete, they would be rolled back into the storage room here. So that's the idea for trash management and operations in the garage. And if I pause at this point to allow for any questions.
Is that door a maintenance door down at the bottom?
That's right, Mr. Chair. This is this room here shaded in gray is a maintenance room at the bottom.
And that's all at the same level?
Yes, yes it is.
And it's all manually. It's not being done by truck?
Yes, it's being done manually. It would be done by staff.
So how big are those dumpsters?
I would turn that over to Dan Riggs. He's the one who designed these rooms. Dan, do you have any...
Yeah, I can answer that. Yeah, those are intended as 2 cubic yard trash dumpsters, and often they can be moved by maintenance staff using a sort of a caddy system. It's like a small motorized vehicle that they can wheel with a hand lever, and allows them to easily manipulate those and rotate them, move them around the spaces they need to.
Thank you. Can I ask if on the bicycle accommodation and the number of bicycle spaces that have been provided, was thought given to the marketing plan for the type of person that would be living here, and some evaluation or some estimation done as to whether or not the person who lives there is also the person who would be riding a bike? Or is it simply a matter of saying, geez, we need a bunch of bike spaces because the peer reviewers and the town and the board is bugging us about multimodal applications, and we'll try to make some accommodation for that? I know that's a bit crude, but I'm wondering where on the spectrum the science is on how many bicycle spaces are actually needed.
Dan, do you have any thoughts on that?
So here we're showing a total of 60 spaces, which we think is appropriate for the location and the ability to connect to other means of infrastructure.
Okay.
The BPDA number is 1 to 1, which put us at 86 spaces, but we don't think it's quite the same scenario as within the city of Boston. So we felt 60 was an appropriate number for the site.
Okay.
And as Jesse specified, we could add additional ones that would be could be, say, deeded to a parking space and associated with it directly at that wall of the car space, for instance.
All right, thank you. I no questions. Mr. O'Brien or Ms. Jaffer, questions?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. With respect to the trash, was there analysis done on how much trash you think will be generated? I'm assuming a weekly, this is supposed to maintain or hold a week's worth of trash for the entire complex. I'm not a trash expert, but it seems small to me.
I can answer part of that question. So we program our trash rooms based on sort of our typical programming logic for multifamily buildings, and on a building from anywhere from 100 to 150 units, we typically include about 400 square feet of trash storage. So here we're including 365 in that one room, and there's also that accessory storage in the maintenance room at the other southern part of the plan. So they can be managed in a variety of ways and emptied at a certain number of intervals throughout the week. we don't really decide that part. We program the spaces based on, kind of industry standard trash room sizes.
And I can add into that. Typically, for a building like this, trash would be done twice a week.
Okay, thanks. And there's no chute system at all the residents just bring their trash down to that area? Is that how it works?
So there is a trash chute system for this room here. So you can see these. It's a little hard to read on the line work here, but you can see that the chutes are essentially these pieces. These pieces here that go and correspond to the stacked trash rooms above them. So generally, the residents don't have access to this main trash room at the garage level, but each floor above this would have access to the chute, which they could drop their trash down into this room.
Okay. So got it. Everyone will be using the chutes, even if you're sort of on the other side of the building. You'll walk to that one particular side.
You go to that side, exactly. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
All set?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair.
Mr. O'Brien?
All set, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. Mr. Schumer, anything else?
Just one thing further to add on this issue of bicycle storage, Mr. Chair. In addition to the spaces that we're showing in this garage, the landscaping plan has an updated detail for the entry circle, and it's now showing 4 additional racks for guest bicycle storage. That was requested by Mr. Bomer, and that would allow storage for 8 additional bicycles. Other than that, Mr. Chair, I have available the tree protection plan, and I would be happy to put that up.
Please.
I see also that Blair Hines is on the line, our landscape architect. I wonder if he could maybe go through this, because I'm sure he could comment on it much more conversantly than I could. Blair, are you available?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, so I don't have access to the visuals right here, but you're talking in terms of the tree protection plan. The key elements are first to fence off all the trees, not just around the drip line, but areas of trees, in order to limit the access of any construction equipment or the storage of construction materials. Secondly, it's very important that for those trees that are close of the construction area, that do irrigation, because although they'll lose a lot of their root system through construction, the root system of a tree is droughty condition. If a tree loses a significant portion of its roots, let's say it's 40%, and you provide supplemental watering, then the tree has the ability to survive. And then after this irrigation system, it can then start to rebuild its roots into the new landscape area. I'm happy to answer any questions that any of the boards.
The connection for Mr. Hines is not good. I didn't catch a lot of that testimony.
I'm sorry. Let me start again. Is this any better?
It is.
Is this better?
It
Yes,
is.
Okay, I'm sorry. Let me start from the top. My apologies. What I was saying is that the key elements of the tree protection plan is to fence off areas the trees are going to be preserved. And the fencing's purpose is to limit any construction vehicle access or storage in those areas. Then the area along the edges of the tree protection zone, where there are some existing trees that you want to preserve, those trees will have lost a significant portion of their roots. You know, could be 20%, could be 40%. And so what you want to do is you want to, the tree's overall root system is really there to support it during, really droughty conditions. And so since it has a more limited root system, you want to irrigate that with a temporary irrigation system so that you're providing the water so that those trees are not failing during, let's say, 2 or 3 or 4 weeks of droughty weather. So that's another very important element of the plan. And I was saying before, I'm happy to answer any of the board's questions they may have the plan.
Mr. Hines, is there a similar treatment of this in the rear to protect those trees?
Yes, there is. And we would have the similar fence, a chain link fence, not a plastic fence, but a chain link fence. It's typically 6 foot high with steel pipes either driven in the ground or otherwise secured. And that area also would have a temporary irrigation system in order to sustain those trees during periods of over a week in which there hasn't been any natural rainfall.
I see. Questions from the members?
No questions from me, Mr. Chairman.
Ms. Joffer?
Or me, thank you.
I don't have any questions. Let me ask Mr. Hill if he's got a question. Anything that he's heard from Mr. Schomer. Before I do that, Mr. Hill, Mr. Schomer, is that complete your? I don't want Mr. Hines to go away because we're probably going to get questions, but I'm wondering if that's the
I will be here
completion.
on the phone. I
Okay.
just haven't had the mic on, so
That's
my
fine.
apologies for it.
No, I see you there. That's fine. That's perfectly okay. I just wanted to let you know that we may have a question for you. So if you could just stay there.
I shall be on
Mr.
the
Schumer,
I will be
are
on
you
the phone.
finished with offering testimony tonight?
If the board members would like to see the pedestrian circulation plan, I can put that up as well. That was a request of Mr. Zawinski.
Sure. Mr. Hill, we'll get to you after Mr. Schumer finishes with us.
This will be my last demonstration, Mr. Chair. So this is sheet L5, and Blair can talk about this some more if I don't cover everything. But this plan is intended to basically show the circulation for pedestrians and vehicles all around the site. So we have here the front entrance, 2 ways, entrance and exit. We have the dedicated loading space here. Vehicles come down here for drop-offs. The larger purple dots and arrows show vehicle circulation through the site. This is exit only here. The smaller pink arrows show pedestrian circulation around the building. So we have access to what we hope to be a multimodal path once Blue Hill Avenue is upgraded, if that plan comes to fruition through the state. To connect to sidewalks at the entrance of the site here and here. Pedestrians can access the circle through here. There's pavement markings to show that pedestrians can go around the circle. The bicycle storage that I mentioned is shown here for 4 racks at the entrance of the circle in front of the north building. And then from there, pedestrians can go around the site pretty much in every direction, into the gardens here, into the parking areas, around the parking areas, into the playground, the outdoor space, and then entrances to the building are provided here, and here. Down here is the trash and maintenance access area that we already showed. And then stars are building entry points for pedestrians around the north building, here, and the west building here, and that's it. So that completes our presentation, Mr. Chair.
So this is designed to accommodate MassDOT's plans for 138?
That's what we have in mind. As you know, Mr. Chair, there currently are no sidewalks on this portion of Blue Hill Avenue. So once the project gets built, it will be a sidewalk that's not really leading to any place other than at this location to the waiting area for the bus. But the hope is that if that project does come to fruition, that these sidewalks that we're providing here and here would allow this project to be accessed from that multimodal path, which would obviously be a great improvement for the neighborhood and for the site and the residents here, and allow them to have much greater accessibility to the neighborhood through bikes and pedestrian access.
Are the sidewalks on the applicant's property or within the limits of the state highway?
the sidewalks that we're showing here, this is the limit of the property, and that's where they stop. With
Where's the limit?
This dark line here, Mr. Chair.
So there's a sidewalk. But isn't the sidewalk on the outside of this? The sidewalk, the gray area?
That's right. So
The gray area is excuse me, Jesse, the gray is actually the existing granite block wall along there.
So I'm wondering where the sidewalk is along 138.
Well, I
So
think that's a question.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say that's a question that would really need to be worked out with the state. And what we're trying to do is show that the design of the landscape within the project area is being responsive to this. And of course, we would be responsive to any direction, either by the town or the state, in terms of a sidewalk along the edge of 138.
Yeah, the wall's in the right of way though, right?
That is correct.
So you're not touching the wall.
Well, there would be some relocate, in order to create the width of the access point off of Blue Hill Avenue, some of the wall would be removed and one of the brick piers would be removed. And the idea would be to open up an opening in the wall for the pedestrian access as you see it there, and then to basically reconstruct it in kind so that the end result looks thoughtful and seems close as possible to as if it was always this way.
Yeah, I'd be interested in seeing how it could be coordinated with MassDOT's multi-use path, which I know is only preliminary, with a school bus stop and a potential MBTA stop. Yeah, and I know you haven't committed to a stop, and you can't commit to a stop, but I do think this has the potential to become a stop, given the density that's being proposed. And I don't want to find ourselves in a chicken and an egg proposal. I certainly want the ability, so should the MBTA be willing to stop its bus here, for that to easily be accommodated, while also accommodating school children who are going to be alighting and getting off the bus here, as well as the multi-use path. It feels like there's a lot of activity in that corner. So I'm interested in how that all might be able to come together. So I'm not sure there's a question in there as much of a comment, but
I think that's an important comment, and we would certainly be responsive as more information comes our way. So we're certainly looking forward to making this successful in terms of a bus stop for both school buses and for MBTA.
Yeah, I'd like to see the school bus. I mean, I think sequentially, it's likely that the multi-use path is going to be the last element. Certainly you want to have a design that does no harm to that, because I do agree that MassDOT's, leveraging that 4-rod wide or 66-foot wide right-of-way is a significant improvement for the town that we don't want to impede, and in fact, would like to enhance. So anything that the applicant can do to facilitate that is put that in the good column. But in the meantime, school buses will be there, and at least I would like to see the MBTA stop there, all along the lines of, commitment to a multimodal facility. So, and I just don't know how that all works there. I'm wondering what you're thinking. Is it a simple matter of putting a sign up there and the school bus pulls over into the shoulder?
Well, I think that there would be presumably a paved area for the bus, whether it's MBTA or school bus, to pull off the travel lane.
Yeah.
And the question really would be, where is the bicycle path? Because you would presume that you wouldn't want to have the bicycle path go right across the school bus or bus stop, because that would be a conflict. But I think these are the kind of details that, can be worked out in the future. And I think there's a commitment on the design team's part to be responsive and thoughtful.
All right. Suffice to say that, we're looking to do a lot here with this cross section, and, we'll require that kind of flexibility. Let me ask the members if they've got questions on the pedestrian plan. Mr. O'Brien.
No questions from me, Mr. Chairman.
Ms. Joffer.
None from me, thank you.
Mr. Zawinski, questions on this plan? Or anything else
I would
you've
have to.
heard?
I would have to give this a little bit of a closer look. It makes intuitive sense to me, the pedestrian circulation component of it. This is, I don't think this is a sort of a holding up detail on the level of some of the other stormwater and construction management issues. I'd like to get a little bit of a better idea of kind of what the signage is going to be at the entrances, just so we can know that they're, clear and concise and comprehensive and coherent for people. That's a minor detail. It's just something that the applicant should be aware of. Like I said, I want to take a little bit of a closer look at the plan. I know in previous comments I had mentioned that it would be great if that waiting area were behind the wall. I'm having a tough time zooming in. I don't know if that waiting area is behind the wall or in front of it. But maybe something a little bit less diagrammatic to sort of display that. Again, just from a safety point of view, the plans for 138 are ambitious, and we're all crossing our fingers and doing our best to get them implemented. But that may not happen before this project is built, and we want to make sure that kids waiting for the bus are nice and safe. But otherwise,
go ahead.
No, like I said, I need to give this up a little bit of a closer look, but it looks pretty okay right now. I may have further questions after a review.
I think leveraging the wall is a great idea for pet safety. I think saving the wall is important. And I think MassDOT's multi-use path is a number of years away. So those are 3 data points to at least think about and work around. Thank you, Ms. Zawinski.
Mr. Chair, before we move on from Mr. Zawinski, could I put up our lighting plan, which does include a mock-up of some proposed signage for the entrance?
Yes.
Yes, bear with me for just one moment, please. Okay, so this is could everyone see this? This is the lighting plan that we provided. There are some color indications of pole lights and in-grade lights, bollard lights, and wall-mounted lights. The signage is in the bottom left corner of the plan shown here. At this point, we're proposing a pretty modest indication of the address of the property, and the name is yet to be determined, but if we zoom in very close here, we're proposing something along the lines of the residences at Shipman Gardens.
Is that the existing wall or is it a new wall?
I can speak to that. We believe that one of the piers can be saved, which is on the Delphi side. And the idea would be to save that and then to have that abut the granite wall along that edge.
Yeah, okay, thank you. Questions
and then
on that?
Good.
I'm sorry, go ahead, Mr. Hines.
No, please, questions.
Questions from the members? No questions from the members? Mr. Zawinski?
Ditto. We did get these plans the other day. I have not had a chance to give them a very close look, so I apologize for that.
Oh.
But again, saving that pier and a nice, modest but clear sign is nice. So I'll give these a closer look, but yeah, looks pretty okay right now.
Thank you. Mr. Schumer? Is that
That's
it?
all from us, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Hill?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I had a few questions on some of the plans that were just put up on the screen. Just, I guess, starting with the tree protection plan, there appeared to be a fence shown on the plan along the rear property boundary. It looked like it was set back 20 feet. I think there was a notation that said it was going to be set back 20 feet. So I just want to clarify from the applicant that the intent here is to basically limit construction approximately 20 feet from that rear property line. Is that where that fence, that barbed wire fence would go?
Yes, that's the intention. So a lot of times on a project like this, you try to set the tree protection fence advantageous to the trees. That also includes the fact that at some point in the construction, you have to blend the existing conditions in with the proposed conditions, at which point the fence would be removed and then the landscaping would happen. But the idea, as you would see in the notes, if you look, is that that would have to be something the contractor specifically states. He has to operate his equipment from beyond that fence line, and then you kind of blend new grading and a lawn or meadow or whatever or plantings in with the existing. So the idea is to be as gentle and careful as possible, and that's what we try to incorporate in our notes.
Okay, and I noticed that at the front of the site there are a bunch of trees that are actually labeled. It looks like they were surveyed at one point, but at the rear of the site there appear to be trees shown there, but they're not labeled. I'm wondering, are those actual trees or are they just?
They are. It's just hard. There's the property line is not identifiable out in the site. That whole area along the property line really has been maintained for many years, and so there's a lot of invasive lines on the trees. And so we're not quite sure where it is. So in the course of construction, the property line would be identified. We'd set it the tree protection fence, and then as soon as we know what trees belong to the project site, we would advise ownership to remove the invasive vines, set up the temporary irrigation that's required. So that would be the process.
Okay, and then there's going to have to be, I'm assuming, some excavation and trench work done in the easement area that goes between the cul-de-sac and the project site. There's going to be a replacement, I believe, of the sewer
Correct.
line and an installation inline. Do you have a limit of work of where you're proposing to do that excavation? And are there any trees on my client's property at 56 Meeting House? Are there any trees in vicinity of that work that might be affected?
I don't know the exact answer to that question. What I can represent is that the whole idea of having the tree protection in there is the contractor cannot work willy-nilly. He has to really specifically request that the fence be removed and basically provide how he's going to work so that any damage to the tree roots can be as limited as possible. That's the purpose of it. Is so they just don't, do whatever they care to do.
Okay, I guess I guess a request that we would make, Mr. Chairman, is that there be more detail shown with respect to the trees on 56 Meeting House in the vicinity of the cul-de-sac, because again, we're expecting there to be a fair amount of work there with utility trenching and installation, but that can be addressed in a condition. With respect to the trash room, I actually had the same concern as Ms. Joffer about the size of the room and the number of containers. I'm not a professional garbologist, but I have worked on several projects similar to this in the past, and including one in Brookline that was a 40-unit project, so half the size, and they had a trash room that had 2 trash containers, 2 recyclable containers, and that was with a trash compactor. And that, even that was questionable in terms of capacity. So I'm surprised that you're only proposing 3 containers. I'm assuming one of those is recyclables. So you're talking maybe 2 trash containers. It just strikes me as not sufficient unless you're going to be picking up the garbage, once a day. And I guess I would urge the town to, perhaps the health department might be able to weigh in terms of experience in other similar projects in town or perhaps in some other communities. Because the last thing you want is a trash room that's too small, and that's going to be a real problem for not just the residents, but for the town of Milton. And then just a short comment, Mr. Chairman, on the construction management plan. So I guess I applaud the effort of providing something to the board, but in reality, what was proposed is really just an outline of a plan. It's not a plan itself. The construction management plans that I've seen in the past that I'm sure Mr. Reardon's going to comment on is you provide actual details as to how they're going to actually effectuate the construction project. And what this document is basically an outline of what the plan will include. So, for example, in the dewatering section, it just simply says that we will be dewatering and will comply with the stormwater standards, and there will be arrangements to ensure there won't be any impacts. That's great, but what exactly are those arrangements, right? I think that's the details that we were seeking, especially with dewatering when that foundation is dug. Where's that groundwater going to end up? So I would still urge the applicant to put pen to paper and give us more details in terms of how they're expecting that to happen. Unfortunately, we're kind of boxed in under 40B because the Housing Appeals Committee has basically made it clear that zoning boards can't require construction management plans. I mean, we don't agree with that, but that's what the HAC says, and you can't require it post-permit either. So you're kind of stuck between a rock and a hard place. Although I would argue that because this is an MS4 discharge, that construction management is something that the board should be looking at, and frankly has to look at as part of the MS4 permit. So hopefully we'll get some more details before the public hearing is closed in terms of how they plan on effectuating the project.
Thank you, Mr. Hill. Anything further?
Not for me, thanks.
Okay, let me ask questions from the participants. Any questions?
Mr. Chair, may I just respond briefly on the point that Attorney Hill raised about the issue of the easement?
Yes.
Just very briefly, I was in Milton about a week and a half ago, and I knocked on Mrs. Wu's door and was informed by her at that time that Attorney Hill is representing her. The reason for my visit to her was because we would like to work with her and her husband on making arrangements to ensure that any impact to her property is minimized, and it's done with an agreement with her. So to the extent Attorney Hill has concerns about impact to trees and would like further details and perhaps would like specific arrangements with his client regarding this issue, we're open to a conversation with him. He has my telephone number, and I would urge him to reach out so we can resolve this issue once and for all.
Fair enough.
That's all I'll say.
Questions from the participants?
Oh, the attendees or oh, I'm sorry. I thought you said the panelists. Too busy writing notes. We have the McGraths.
Mrs. McGrath.
I'm sorry.
Hi, this is Amy McGrath. Thank you, everyone. So I'm just looking at the plans, the new plans that were put up on the website. I don't know if it was yesterday or day before, but what looks to be a revised, it's May, well, what I'm looking at is May 10th, 2021. I don't know, what day this was put up. It looked to be yesterday, but so I know that I've talked about this before, and I just need some help understanding this. When you look at the 107, the span of the 170-foot long building, I don't know if you call it northeast, whatever you call it, but the one that you can see from Robin Street, that's 170 feet long. The images that are in these plans are just not accurate in the sense that, one of the ones that it's talking about, it shows our property, but those trees don't exist on our property. So it looks like that there's all this buffer between the 170-foot long building and Robin Street, and in particular our house and 582, but those trees don't exist. So what happens if someone puts plans up, if there's plans that are put up that don't represent reality? That I don't understand, how, and I know the last time I asked this question, it was, well, we use whatever GIS or something, but it's just not what's there. Anybody can come and drive by and see that those trees don't exist. There is no buffer like they're showing there. And then the other thing that I'm really struggling with in the planning board's presentation last week made me really kind of hone in on this. And maybe the applicant, I don't know if Mr. Temposi can answer this or, one of his consultants, but when the site is, cleared for construction, so if you walk on the site today, where the carriage house exists right now, if you were standing on, my property or 582, there is a 25-foot drop right at the end, at the edge of the carriage house. And so is the intent that all kinds of soil is going to be removed to bring like the level of the building, of the level of the site down? Or in fact, is the whole thing coming up? And what the planning board had said, and I'm sure this information is somewhere, but if someone can explain it to me, what the planning board has said is that there will be a very significant increase in height because of the soil that will be brought in. And so that doesn't comport with, if that's the case, that more soil is being brought in and therefore the height of the building will be, the 25 feet drop plus the height of the building, but then in addition, I think they said 12 feet or something to what's there now. The view from Robin Street that's in the comprehensive plan submittals is just not accurate unless they're taking out a whole bunch of the site. So can someone, and I don't know if that's English, what I said, but can somebody explain, how that construction process is really part of the whole construction management plan, but how that's going to work? Or what's actually going to happen in reality and what it's going to look like in reality?
Mr. Schumer.
I can attempt to answer that, Ms. McGrath, through the chair. There are some portions of the, and Dan, I see, put his camera up, so feel free to add, Dan. There are some portions of the site that are going to be filled and some portions of the site that are going to be graded down. And the construction management plan discusses specifically the issue of the detention basin at the bottom of the site, where the grade is coming down. And the idea there is to grade that down and use that, if it's suitable, as fill for other locations where the grade comes up. Dan, did I explain that accurately?
Would you be able to show, Dan, on the, Mr. Mullen, I can just speak directly to you, but it would be, can somebody show on a plan what's going to happen in both in the Meeting House side and on the Robin Street side? And I apologize for the people who live on the other side. I don't know their names, but to show what is going to happen. The retaining wall is going to be put up basically around the whole site, but are things coming up, things coming down? What are we really going to be looking at? And I know that that's what these plans show, but if you can show it on the, I don't know if it was page 1 or 2.
Thanks, Mrs. McGrath. I can respond to the image portion of that in terms of what we were representing on that Robin Street. Sorry, if you don't mind me sharing my screen really quickly.
Thank you.
So the image that we were basing that drawing off, and again, that was meant to be kind of a conceptual rendering of this condition, was this photo that we had taken from Robin Street of the site. And if you zoom in here, if I zoom in here, you can see the area. Sorry, you can see the area between this photo and the site is actually this existing tree buffer. You can see the stream between that viewpoint and the building, as well as the Delphi Academy property here. So that's what we were attempting to represent in our rendered image, which I can bring up now as well.
Yeah.
Give me one moment. And, so again, this is that kind of zoomed in conceptual illustration of the existing tree growth. Again, it would take us weeks to get every tree exactly perfect in the offsite. conditions and stream, et cetera, to get that all exactly perfect. But we're looking to illustrate that condition of the Delphi property and some of the existing tree growth between that vantage point and our property, as well as the retaining wall there. So I hope that helps to explain at least that portion of the.
Not really. Mr. Milton, could you ask if we could go to, it's not me, by the way. I don't have kids who live to work.
Yeah.
I'm at the office, but no kids here.
Not me?
Really missing out.
No, it's not. I want some pie. Oh, good. I'll have some pie.
Who's ever, I don't know where the back. What's the question?
If you look on, if you're looking at sheet 1 or sheet 2 of the 12, if you look at the 170-foot north building, and then you look at the one-way, that says one-way circulation, the driveway there. So where the carriage house is right now, I assume is sort of right at the edge of this, where they're putting the grazing, and then there's this very steep drop that comes down. Can somebody on the construction team explain this north building? Is this all going to be, this whole area right here, going to be built up, or is it going to be graded down? So is the fill going in there such that it's going to be higher, and then everyone on this side is going to see, an increase? Like if we were looking at the carriage house today, it's actually going to increase, a height, the height is going to be higher.
Mr. Chairman, before we go into that, perhaps Ms. McGrath might be able to, there, at least on the set of plans that I have in the lower right-hand corner, there are numbers like A000, A020. Perhaps if Ms. McGrath has access to the same plans, if you could give us the number so we're all looking at the same thing.
Sorry, it's A010 architectural site plan, and then the date is May 17th.
Okay, I have that. I just want to make sure that that I'm looking at what you're looking at. Thank you.
Can you confirm that that's the latest in site plan and what is, being, is being finalized?
Should have a revision date of July 16 on it. July 6th, sorry. See the revision date?
Again, I can share my screen and quickly show
put that up,
that plan.
A10.
Yeah, absolutely. This is probably a question better answered by the civil engineer in terms of how the site is graded and the retaining walls at that point. But I can show you the architectural site plan here, which is really just meant to be a coordination plan between the different disciplines and help to kind of show all that in one place. I believe this is the area that Ms. McGrath is referring to.
Yes.
But again, that is shown in greater detail on the civil engineering plans. So I don't know if
are those up on the website as well for me to look at?
They should be. I'm not the expert on what's on there, but
okay. So is there a civil engineer on the phone who can say, what? And again, I'm not trying to be difficult. I'm just trying to understand. It may be that viewpoint that you showed, at 582, it's because the grade is coming down. And so if that's the case, just if you can just explain that.
Mr. Chair, I can perhaps help with that.
Red.
So just for reference, the entry to the proposed garage is at elevation 112.
Okay.
And the elevation at the back of the existing carriage house is about 114. So the actual entry to the garage is going to be about 2 feet lower than the existing grade at the back of the carriage house.
Okay. And so the fill that's coming in will just be because right now there's just a slope down. So you're going to just fill it in, put the retaining wall on the outside.
Exactly. Yep.
Yeah, to elaborate on what Sean said, thank you, Mr. Reardon. But we're essentially leveling this to create a level area for this drive surface to surround the building at that point and have the maintenance access and the drive access to the building itself fairly co-planar. So that involves lowering some areas and raising some areas towards the rear, whereas we're lowering areas more towards the Delphi area of the
And
site.
so in the rear, what is the existing elevation now and what will it be? And I know this, I'm sorry to take up time for something that's probably online, but.
So the elevation is location sensitive. What I can tell you is at the back of the carriage house, it's about elevation 114. At the front of the carriage house, it's about 116. And the grade falls off as you get away from the carriage house towards the property line.
Okay. And then I just had one other question to ask the board. Would there be a condition that the applicant pays for someone who's on site to actually make sure that these things are enforced? I know you can't even get a building permit for a deck in Milton right now because there's nobody to, they're just so short-staffed. So how does that work in the real world? When people start coming on site, is there an on-site person that is charged with enforcing the conditions of the special permit?
I don't know. We've not talked about that, and that's something. I mean, we'll take that as a request and talk about it. And when we get to the discussion of the conditions, it's a good point.
Okay.
I appreciate the point.
Okay. Thank you for your time.
You're welcome. Anybody else with a question?
Mr. Chairman, could I ask a question?
Mr. Hill.
Would it be possible to have John Chestia address the offsite drainage analysis that he did, since most of the neighbors who are on the Zoom tonight actually are part of our group and have retained him to do that?
Right now?
Well, at some point tonight. He is here tonight, and since the topic did come up earlier.
You mean more so than he's already testified to, Dan?
Well, he hasn't spoken. He hasn't
spoken at the last 4 hearings. All right. Okay. Go ahead.
John, can you just explain what I was trying to explain earlier about the 2 data points that you were referring to that you felt showed that the offsite drainage was going to be adversely impacted by the project?
Sure. So, and I think basically what's happening is, so you have this piece of property which has water flowing off it in multiple directions. Some flows to the intermittent stream, very little flows to the catch basin and Meeting House Lane, and the rest of it sort of flows overland in a broad stretch of land without necessarily any sort of concentrated runoff. So when you compare, say, 400 or 500 feet of, sort of linear property line, and you assume it's all at 1 or 2 locations in terms of a flow rate, which is what was done, and then you compare that to a connection at a pipe, it sounds like it's about the same, but the impact is not the same, because when you put that much water into the pipe, it does affect the capacity of the pipes downstream. We know it's restricted. And what I'm saying, I guess, when we look at it upstream, the capacity of the pipe is 9 CFS plus, but the restrictive one is 2.5 CFS. If you put more volume through that restricted pipe, it has nowhere to go but up. It's going to back up and fill up, and it'll flood more frequently, and it would flood higher, most likely, in some storms. So in simplistic terms, that's, I think, the impact that we're trying to have assessed that hasn't really been done with the model that was submitted. And I think it's an oversimplification to just say, we're holding it back on the site. If there's a restriction, the water will back up behind that restriction, as the videos have shown, and it will rise higher. Now, when you connect it to a pipe at the very top of the system, it definitely will impact that pipe system. And when it hits the smaller capacity pipes, it's got nowhere to go but up out of the manholes, out of the catch basins. It's just like a water system with a pressure above. You put a hole in something, it's going to come squirting out. And the hole would be the catch basin or the manhole cover. That's as simple as I can put it.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chesia. I mean, I think we've heard a fair bit of testimony on the point. There's obviously a disagreement between the experts. What I'd like to do is ask Mr. Reardon, not tonight, but in his submittal to us on the 4th of August, to address what Mr. Chesia's point has just been made, the point that's been made. Is that acceptable, Mr. Hill?
Yeah, that would be great. Thank you.
Okay, let's get back to the question. Thank you, Mr. Chesia. The questions from the participants in the hearing.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Anybody else have a question?
Yeah, I have another one by Amy and Michael, and I just want to confirm that it's from the same person, but it's two different hands.
No, but it's the same. Sorry.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Anybody else?
No.
Okay. So let me let's see if we can set a game plan for what we're doing here. Next week, we're going to hear from the Board of Selectmen. I think you'll also hear from the Board of Appeals on several of the issues that came up tonight. Mr. Schumer, I think you should be prepared to respond to some issues that came up tonight, including, I think Ms. McGrath's question really boils down to having a better understanding of the cut and the fill that's on the site. I don't know that that's been sufficiently explained, but I do think it's a good question, and I think it's central to understanding how the elevations work and how the soil is being brought onto the site, and was a big piece of what the planning board mentioned. So I'm interested in that as well. I'm going to ask if Mr. Zawinski can share with the Board of Health the concern about the size of the trash room. It seems fundamental. I have no idea how big that needs to be, but it seems like an important matter. And I know the Board of Health has already testified in this hearing, but I think we should make them aware of the size of the building, the output. I mean, I'm sure there's some science behind this and there's some standards. And I heard what Mr. Tamposi said, but that would be helpful feedback. And I don't know that the Board of Health needs to appear, but I'd like to hear from the Board of Health on that issue. I think more thought needs to be done about how the school bus is going to work, and everything that's going on with the intersection of the egress drive or the entrance drive, the wall, the state highway, the limit of property, and getting school children safely on a bus. I don't want to leave it to we'll figure it out. That seems to me to be some preliminary engineering, or I want to make sure the concept works before we begin relying on it, especially if ultimately I could see that school bus being converted to a bona fide MBTA stop to be someday be converted to a multi-use path. I'm talking about some preliminary feedback. And then I think maybe a little bit of feedback on the earlier questions about the contractor and what the contractor is about and your experience with the contractor and some of the feedback that you got on the preliminary construction management plan. So I see that as next week's work. Obviously take questions on that. I don't know that we need to meet on the 28th. We can meet on the 4th and give you feedback from the peer reviews. We'll meet on the 11th to close the evidence. Let me say on the 4th, on the 21st, I think we should review the waivers. We have them here. You've modified them. Thank you. But we can go through each of them. And then we'll have the 4th, we'll have for the peer review. The 11th, we'll have for the close of the evidentiary portion, and then the board can further deliberate the following hearing, something like that. That's what I see. I wonder if there's comments from the members.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have a question with respect to the Conservation Commission. Are we expecting to hear from them again in greater detail?
I don't know. I mean, I'd certainly welcome them, but I think we've heard from them and are working with the submittal that they've made to us, I think. Mr. Zawinski?
Mr. Chair, yeah, Mr. Chair, my recollection from Mr. Kiernan's previous testimony is that, you know, he did offer kind of general comments, but I think because this is going to be an issue that's going to be before his commission, he kind of needed to hold back on some of the comments that he would normally have made and kind of save that for his own body's kind of jurisdictional review. So if there are specific questions that the board has for the Conservation Commission, you know, it would be great to get those and we can see if we can get those questions answered in some way. But in terms of a kind of a broad-based set of comments from the chair of the Conservation Commission, I think they're going to hold that for their own review.
Ms. Joffer?
Yeah, if Mr. Zawinski can provide some clarity on the protocol. So their own review after our determination?
So, and I may ask Mr. Schomer to kind of walk through, you know, his expectations for how the process will go, but because they're proposing work in the buffer zone around wetlands that have been delineated, you know, under the State Wetlands Protection Act, they're required to go to the Conservation Commission for an order of conditions, you know, to get the authorization to do that work. You know, if I'm misstating things, I'll ask Mr. Schomer if it's possible to offer some clarity on exactly kind of what that process looks like and what the steps are.
Mr. Chair, Mr. Zawinski is not misstating anything about the CONCOM process. I would only add that during that process, the stormwater management system will also be reviewed for compliance with the state stormwater standards.
Mr. Chair, may I ask a question?
Yeah.
Process-wise, one of the other hearings before we close, the board will be reviewing draft conditions.
Yep.
Does the board want to do that in this case?
Yep. Yes.
And when would we want to plug that in?
Well, we're going to deliberate as soon as we can get. I want to see Mr. Schumer's conditions and
Okay, right.
we can have a conversation about that.
And we have a number to prepare as well that we would be adding theirs to, or keeping them as two separate documents perhaps. But I think you want to at least discuss those as part of the hearing process in case you need more information with which to evaluate the conditions. Because once you close the evidentiary part of the hearing, that's it.
Yeah. Well, if we need more time, we need more time. You know, as soon as we get the conditions, we can begin to work with them, but we can't work with them until we have them.
Of course. So,
Yeah.
Mr. Schomer, when do you think you'd be providing us with your sense of the draft conditions so that we will have at least your input to consider?
I will make that my first priority and commit to having that filed before next week's hearing.
Okay. Can you make sure I receive them, because we have kind of a format and there are conditions I know the peer review consultants are going to want to weigh in on, and I'm going to want, and perhaps I'm sure the town staff. I mean, I promised the planning director that that anything that went to the board, the town staff would have a chance to weigh in on, because you know we need to know what they need as well in the conditions.
Certainly, I can work with you with respect to formatting to make sure that we're submitting them in the correct format.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Schomer, in light of the fact that we're going to, with your testimony tonight, that in order to confirm that the on-site drainage will not exacerbate the off-site, we need some further evaluation of the off-site infrastructure, and Mr. Berkeley is going to provide a scope of work. Would the applicant be willing to do that work for the town?
I think we would need to see the proposal, Mr. Chair, to know what it entails.
Can we get that scope of work to Mr. Schomer as soon as possible and have a discussion next week on that issue? I think we're gonna need to know the results of that test before we develop a sense of confidence on the impact to the offsite properties. That's what I understood Mr. Berkeley's testimony to be.
That's,
I can, Mr. Chair, I can send that first thing in the morning as soon as I get to my desk.
Mr. Schomer?
nothing further from me.
Is there anything further? Anything from the members? Ms. Barrett?
No, I have nothing further.
Mr. Hill?
I'm good. Thank you.
Mr. Schomer?
Nothing further. Thank you very much.
Okay, there's no further, nothing further for the board tonight. We'll recess this hearing till 7 o'clock on the 21st. And then at which time we'll be expecting to hear from a member of the Board of Selectmen. We'll go through the waivers. We'll get some further feedback from the applicant and some answers to the questions that have been raised tonight, and we'll take questions from the audience. Thank you very much. Good night.
Thank you.